All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Thanks for dialing in. And let's get started with an introduction from my side. Well, my name is Ashutosh, and I am a developer evangelist at R3. So I look after all the developer evangelism and developer relations activities that we do here for R3 in APAC region. And I also have Reena with me. So she'll be available here to help you guys with any questions that you have. So feel free to put your questions on the chat and she'll be able to answer them. I'll also take a look at them from time to time, and then but she's out there to help you guys with all your questions that you have. So without further delay, let's get started. So what exactly are we doing today? Like the webinar says, using Kubernetes and Corda to deploy bank in a box. So what exactly is bank in a box, right? So bank in a box is an application that we have built, and we want to showcase it to you guys. And we've used Kubernetes to deploy this particular application. And I'll also be using Helm to manage all these containers and stuff. So let me just go ahead. Before we start, here are a few references which will be really helpful for people who are really new to Corda and you've just joined in. So we have our YouTube channel where you'll find many useful content, a lot of useful training materials as well. So just feel free to subscribe it so that you get notified for any new content that we put out there. We also have a free training site, which is available at training.corda.net, and it takes a sort of a streamlined approach, which starts from the basics and takes you through some of the advanced concepts of Corda. If you're new to Corda and want to learn more, I would recommend it's a great site to start. And then we have a public Slack, which is our community of Corda developers or CordApp developers, you could say. It's a quite a large community now. We have more than 9,500 Corda developers registered who were who are ready or always ready to help each other out. So if you are new and you don't know about the public Slack, then perhaps it's a good time to join and start collaborating with others. We also have our documentation at docs.corda.net. Anything that you want to know about Corda is available out there. So it's our official documentation. And if you're a developer, then you want to look at the code, how Corda really works from within. So go out to our GitHub repository. Corda is open source, at least the open source part of it or the community version of it. So you could look at the code and see what's happening down there. If you want to reach out to us, you could use R3 developer relations at r3.com. That's our that's the email for the DevRel group, and we'll respond. Someone of us from the team will respond. And if you're a Twitter guy, you like to tweet, the handles that you could use is Corda blockchain or inside R3. Do use the hashtags #Corda and #R3. All right. So let's move on. So what's the goal for today? What are we really going to do? So we have started doing this themed kind of webinars now, where we focus on a particular industry. And the theme for today is going to be capital markets. So we'll have a brief of Corda and how Corda has been utilized in capital markets and what our focus is from the R3's perspective. And then, sorry. And then I'm going to have a brief of Corda so that you understand what Corda is, and people who are joining in for the first time, they also understand what Corda is, what it is built of. And then sort of an introduction. I wouldn't say like an introduction. It's not kind of a crash course, but just like we could say a definition so people understand what Kubernetes and what Helm is and what we are really doing. And then we'll walk through the demo. And finally, I'll also show you some code. It's not going to be like the complete code or the complete demo of the application because it's quite a broad application, a lot of features available. So I'll just walk through one of the feature and show you some of the code, and I'll share the links with you so that you can actually go ahead and dig deeper on your own. All right, so let's get going. So capital markets is the theme that we talked about. So what exactly are we focusing on in capital markets, right? If you say capital market, it's like a huge area, and there are hundreds of, if not thousands of use cases available out there in capital markets. You can't be targeting each and every one of them. That would be way too much. So there are a few things that we are doing within capital markets. But if you look at capital markets from a broad view, right? So few things that you could do is one is like the issuing an asset on ledger, and then once you've issued it, you have to manage that asset. So it all comes down to that, right? Once you issue it and then you manage it, at some time you, so that would also come under manage, that you have to clear out that asset, right? So our primary focus, I would say, is more or less on issuance. So once we have assets issued on the ledger, we can then go ahead and make things like how you could manage them on the ledger. So for the second step to happen, you need the first step to happen. That's our primary focus, which is primary issuance, letting customers and startups allow or provide them with the opportunity to, or allow them to have their assets issue on the ledger. And when I say ledger, it's the Corda ledger, right? So the next thing that is something, I wouldn't say it's a primary focus, but this is something that we are doing is direct asset transfer. So you could transfer assets within different parties within a particular Corda network, and that would help faster clearing, because again, you don't have to go through all the details and all the reconciliation stuff which happens when you do things in a normal way, right? So there is also some of we also have some startups who have already started doing this kind of work. And finally, we have payments and settlements. Quite a broad field, doesn't only apply to capital markets but to a lot of other different domains as well. And that's one of the things that we are also focusing on. And towards that, we have released different API, different libraries or APIs, you could say, like the token SDK. And the next thing that we will be releasing in few time is the payments SDK, to make these things easier for developers. So the developers can now actually go ahead and integrate their systems with different payment rails as well. Right. So some examples worth mentioning in this particular area is the Spanta blockchain. If you haven't really heard of it, it's a consortium of Italian banks, and quite a large number of banks. Actually, there are 100 of them, and it's actually a live example. People are already doing transactions on them, and they have already made more than 200 million transactions on this particular blockchain. And that's a number which I'm quoting is quite old. It's a number which was released in a press release back in 2000, back in January, I believe, or close to December or January, somewhere there. And I'm sure they would have done, that number would have gone up significantly by now. And then we have NASDAQ. That's also a name which we're proud to take. They're in the process of building their next gen platform using Corda blockchain. So that's a great thing to happen in the future. And finally, we have a partner called Contour, which you may or may not have heard. They are one of the large trade finance networks based in APAC. They're headquartered in Singapore, and they are also live. And they also have some big names which are onboarded onto their network. Names like HSBC or Standard Chartered, BNP Paribas, and few other names around there. So these are like some of the big examples. There are a lot more use cases and a lot more different examples, but the few of them worth mentioning, which you might be able to connect, are these ones. All right. So that's that's what we have been doing. And let's just move on and try and look at our scenario in hand today, what we are really doing. So as I said, Bank in a Box is more like an application, a banking application, where you would have features of a bank. Like what does a bank does? It creates account, it onboard customers, it helps you do payments, it gives out loans and stuff, monitor transactions. And reliable infrastructure and 24/7 availability is a feature which is not which is majorly provided by Kubernetes clusters and stuff, which will be deploying our Corda nodes on, and other services on. Right. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll not be taking care of all the different banking aspects is in terms of loans and other kind of things that you could do within a banking application. But what we'll rather do is we'll create accounts for our customers, and then we'll try and do transactions between customers. That's the bare minimum that we'll be doing today. And what I'll also do is show the code for some of these things that we'll do during the demo, and then I'll leave it to you guys to basically go ahead and explore more on your own. It's a big application, so it'll be good for someone who wants to see how a real world application would look like. So I'll share the source code with you guys. Right. So software stack that we are using, obviously we talked about Kubernetes. So we'll be using that and obviously Helm to define our deployments. So we'll have the Helm charts, which will help us to visualize some of our containers there. And then we have our Corda nodes, we have the notary, we also have an oracle and a credit rating, oracle for credit rating. It's an oracle which will provide us some credit ratings for customers, but we'll not be using it for this particular example, but it's there. If you want to go out for a loan or something, then you could use this particular workflow where the oracle is used, and then you can try that out on your own. All right, and obviously Node for the bank itself, right? And few other things like the web servers and the front ends, which will be used, the clients and the front end, which will be serving the website to our customers and also the bank officials, right? Perfect. So like we said, we'll just talk about what Kubernetes is, not a crash course or anything, but just so that you know what it is. Well, you might have heard of Docker, right? You can create Dockerized images and then you can run them within Docker. But with Kubernetes, you can control or have access, have better management of multiple different containers. So Docker help you build containers and run them, and Kubernetes will help you manage a lot of different containers, right? So it also helps, has different other features, like it prevents you from different outages and stuff. So for example, if you have an outage in one of the container, then Kubernetes has the ability to spin up another container that can then serve the client request while your other container is down, right? And you can do other stuff like scaling in terms of horizontal scaling or vertical scaling. Well, Kubernetes can basically help you in terms of that as well. Now, what exactly is Helm? Well, Helm is like a package manager for Kubernetes. You can basically create different configurations for a group of containers that are supposed to perform together or that are linked together in a way. So if you have multiple containers, then you can create service deployments for them, and then Helm will also help you group them together. And other thing that Helm also comes with charts, right? So it can help you give to visualize these containers together and also see what's going on. So if one of your nodes for say is down, you can actually use these charts to see how things are going on within your Kubernetes clusters. So this will help you manage different Kubernetes clusters, right? So that's a basics of what these things are. I don't want to dive deeper into it, but just kind of an introduction, or you could say um, um, title of what these things are, so that you understand, just a definition kind of thing, right? So before we just go ahead and look at how things work in our Bank in a Box app, let's just recap some of the things that Corda has. Well, Corda, when you write your applications on Corda, you basically write three different components: the states, contracts, and the flows. Well, states are your assets. So when I say I want to onboard an asset or put an asset on Corda, it's a state that you create, and this state gets updated, consumed, and stored onto the ledger, right? Then we have contracts. These are the ones which govern evolution of the asset. Now, when I say evolution, it has all the rules that needs to be evaluated, or all the rules that needs to be validated when you are going to run a transaction on a particular state. So, want to update a state, you have to run through all these different rules that you've defined in your contracts. So these are basically your smart contracts, you could say, which prevents any kind of inappropriate transactions. And then we have flows. So you could think of this as business logic, or a better term would be business flows. So every business workflow would basically have certain steps that you want to perform, right? A particular transaction would require, for say, data from different systems, or perhaps different levels of checks and different people giving it a go ahead, and these kind of things where basically you have to run a particular workflow, right? So this flows feature of Corda will allow you to do that. It will basically allow you to mimic that particular business workflow where you collect data from different parties, and then have different parties check that transaction, and finally, once everything is all right, you can then go ahead and record the transaction onto the ledger. So flows allow you to do all those kind of things. All right. So digging a little deeper into states. Well, states represents objects, and the states are not like global states. If you issue an asset, it's not like global, and not everyone will be able to see this state. So state will be only distributed on a need to know basis. So if even there are like 100 parties in a particular network, and you're just doing transaction with one other party, then only you and the other party will be able to see what that state has, right? What that particular asset has, while others being in the network will not know what's going on, right? So state is just like a Java class. It has certain properties of, just like it's a token. So it has things like an issuer, owner, and an amount, which are the properties of the token. So similarly, if it would be a vehicle, it would have other things like the vehicle identification number, the model number, and the color of the vehicle, and all the different properties that you think of that a vehicle could have, right? So this is where I already talked about this. The states are distributed on a need to know basis, and not everyone know about this. So if there are different parties, which are like Bob, Alice, and Ed, Carl, and Demi, like the bigger circles that you see here, then not everyone will have access to all the states. So you could see that the state one here, which is in the red circle, is only available to Bob and Alice, and others will not know about this. So basically, you just have a subset of the global or the entire view of the ledger. You don't really have the full view of the ledger, unless you have unless you have designed your network in that way, that someone in the network who is perhaps a regulator want to have entire view of the ledger. So that's also possible, but yeah, by default it's all point to point, and not everyone view what's going on within the system. All right. So that's contracts, and then when we that's states actually, and then when we talk about contracts, well, we need to talk a little bit about transactions here. So with transactions, you have inputs and outputs. So inputs are the states that are already recorded onto the ledger, and each states will evolve over time, right? So if you have an input that you're putting into a transaction, then it will produce an output, and that output can again be used in other transactions. While the input that you put into the transaction will be marked as spent, which means you cannot really use that with any other transaction. So once your input has been used in one transaction, it cannot anymore be used in other transactions, right? So that's how transactions work. So that's where this is a standard UTXO model, which even Bitcoin follows, right? So when you build a transaction, it goes through the contract rules, and that's where you look at the content of the transaction, what the input state is, what the output state is, and finally you come to a conclusion whether all the rules that you've written down in your contract are valid as per the transactions data. And if that's the case, then you can go ahead and record the update on the ledger. But even if one of the rules, not just all the rules, even if one of the rules fail among them, then basically you say that this is not a valid transaction and this needs to be rejected. And hence, once it's rejected, any update that it's trying to make will not be recorded on the ledger. All right, so that's how your contract would look like. You would have certain, you would have normally a Java class or a Kotlin, whichever you are programming in, and you have to implement something called as the contract interface, and that will provide you with a method called verify, within which you could put down all your logic for your transaction validations, right? Coming to flows, well, like I said, these are all your business workflows that you want. Now the flow would have two different parts, right? One is an initiator, and then the other is a responder. So if you look at any flow, right, we are talking about distributed systems. So two different nodes or Corda nodes are interacting with each other. So when I initiate a flow, I generally use the initiator flow, which is basically at the end where at the at that end of the node who is initiating the particular transaction, and then there will be others who will validate the transactions, right? So like here you have node B, who will also have a look at the transaction to see whether he agrees with what's happening within the transaction. So that flow which he'll be running is called as the responder flow. So the initiator will ask for the responder for his inputs, and then once he responds using the responder flow, right? So again, looking at the flow, there are certain steps that we follow and in a sequential manner. So this is an example of a very simple two-party trade where you basically have two nodes, and obviously it's the notary who is validating your transactions. So people who doesn't know what notary is, well, notary is a component within our Corda ecosystem where every transaction has to go through that. You have to get a go ahead from the notary. so that your transaction can be recorded on the ledger. It's more like notarizing your transaction to make sure that it's not a case of double spend. The primary purpose of notary here is just to prevent any case of double spend, and that's what notary generally does. Right. So in this case, what we have is Node A is generally proposing a transaction. He wants to update something that's on the ledger. And then once he has created the transaction, we'll build that transaction. And then once he has built that transaction, he has to check for update, check update, which means he'll have to check the contract, whether this transaction that I have just built is valid as per the contract that is defined. If that's the case, he will sign the transaction and send it over to the next node, or next node in the sense the counterparty node. If there are one, he'll just send it to one. If there are multiple counterparties, he'll send it to multiple of them. So there is just one in our case. And when the counterparty receives this transaction, he'll use the responder flow to also do a check whether this particular transaction that he has sent, that has been sent to him, is valid as per the contract. Well, that's because he doesn't trust anyone, right? He has to do all the checks on his own. So once he validates, he sees that everything is fine, he'll go ahead and sign the transaction and then send it back to whoever has sent to him, right? So once Node A receives the completely signed transaction, he can send it to the notary for notarization. Notary checks for double spend, and if it's not a case of double spend, notary will sign the transaction and send it back to the initiator, from where he can basically distribute it to everyone who is involved in that particular transaction. And that's how your complete flow logic will end. But this is an example of very simple flow. You can have multiple complex flows where there will be a lot of to and fro between different parties, right? But this is the most simple one that you could build. All right. So that's sort of a very high level overview of what what Corda is. But let's just come back and concentrate on our bank in a box. So what we'll really do here is we have a bank and we have our customers. So we're not focusing on the credit rating oracle. So just for example, that's used only for when your customers ask for loan, and then you just go to the credit rating oracle to validate if they have a good credit score or not, right? So we are not. So that would still run in the background, but we're not using that particular flow today. We'll just run a simple example where we will try to create accounts and we will transact within those accounts. So basically, there can be a customer who would come to a bank and he wants to apply for an account, wants to create an account. So a bank official will create an account for him, and then this client can then go back to his place, and once he is free, he can then go ahead and register himself. Once he registers himself, the bank official can then just go ahead and activate his account. And once these accounts are activated, they can do deposits, and then they can do intrabank transfers and all. So that's what we'll see how these things will be done in our application. Right. So let's go to the demo. All right. So before that, let me just show you something. I will share my things again. All right. So here are all the steps that you would need in case you want to deploy your own Kubernetes cluster and stuff. I'm not doing it in front of you guys because I'll have to build out all these Docker images and stuff, which will take quite a lot of time, and will lose a lot of time. So I have already pre-built all the images and stuff, and I'm just going to run it so that we can perform our demo, right? So it has this particular document. We'll share it with you guys, which has all the different commands that you would basically need. So it has starting from installation. So you can install Docker, Kubernetes, and Helm. And then the next command, I'll just run through all these commands so that you know what's going on. Next command is to add your Kubernetes dashboard that will allow us to visualize our containers using Helm, right? So, and finally we'll install that particular dashboard. And then we can serve our, we can use Kubernetes proxy command, which will kubectl proxy command. What that will do is it will proxy our traffic from our Kubernetes clusters to our local browser. So we'll be then able to um, we'll be then able to log into our Kubernetes dashboard, right? So I'll start from here. I have done all these things earlier. So before that, once you have done all these steps, or let's just go one after the other, right? So once I've run the proxy command, I should be able to visualize my dashboard using this particular URL. Oops. Okay. All right. Docker isn't running for me. Just give me a second. Just run Docker. All right. So while Docker starts up, the system has started to scream. Anyways, so let me just go through some of these commands while Docker basically starts up. Once you have Docker containers running properly, then you can use the Kubernetes proxy command to basically log into the dashboard, right? So once you have this one, you'll not be able to log in. You'll need a admin account. So we have defined an admin account in this particular YAML file, which is found in this location. So once you have your proxy, once you have your dashboard, once you have your um, proxy serving this particular site, right, then you could basically go ahead and just download this particular YAML file and then use these all commands, which will basically configure your admin user. And once that is configured, you need a token to be able to log in into your uh, your your dashboard. So for that, we'll use these commands, which will basically allow you to get your token. So I'll run them one after the other so that you can see what's going on. My Docker is taking some time to start up. Arena, am I audible? Because I think my system is actually freezing.
You're audible. We can hear you.
All right.
You're only showing your browser, right?
Yeah, currently I'm waiting for my containers to come on. My system has gone very slow. I think because I believe it requires a lot of memory for all the containers that we are running. There's quite a lot of them. So generally you would need 8 GB CPUs for your 8 CPUs for your that you have to assign to your Docker instance, and also 12 gigs of RAM. All right, so I believe Docker is up. Let me just check. I'll just share my screen so that you'll also be able to see the terminal that I'm typing commands on. All right. So I have all the containers that's running. Okay, all of them are up. Okay, now my proxy command should work. Okay, perfect. Now to log in, we'll need a token of the admin from which will generate using the admin user. Like I said, we have defined a user using this particular YAML file, which you could download from this location, and then use these commands to create the token, right? Once you have done these, once you run this particular command, right? So this will basically apply your user, and you can use this to get a token. All right. So this is not really the actual token that we'll use to log in, but we'll need a secret. For that, we will have to use this particular command. And then just have to replace this one with whatever is right here. That is 9JB27. All right, so this is what this long string is what we will need to log in. Just copy that. And paste it here and sign in. All right, so we have all these different deployments and stuff. This is our Helm chart actually. And then this is where you could see that all of our containers are working perfectly fine, right? All right. So we see that so you could basically manage all your different things here. Like you could see how your containers are working. Well, I see that one of my container has gone down for some reason. It should be coming up now. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. Now I am all ready to move to the next step, which is basically so I'm not going to run this. Well, this was so initially for you when you're running these, you would not see this particular dashboard coming up because you don't have the deployments. This is where all the commands are, which will help you to deploy your deploy your different containers onto Kubernetes. So first you'll have to go to our repo where we have, or you have to download the repo where we have the Bank of Box application, and then run these commands, which will build your applications like the workflow jar, the contracts jar, and the Oracle and other things that are available. Like there is also the web services, which is like it's more or less a dummy web service, which is supposed to get credit ratings from a credit agency, but we have just hard coded it over there. And this is a client which will communicate with our nodes. And finally, these are the commands which you can use to build your Docker images. And once you have that, you can use these to install them onto Helm. And finally, once you have done all these have been done perfectly fine, you can run this command, which will basically give you all your Kubernetes services. These are the containers that Kubernetes is managing, right? So we have a front-end service, which is running on port 32581, and then I can just go ahead and log in. And there you go. This is our Bang-in-a-Box application. I can just go ahead and log in. The admin password is provided over here. Here you go, admin and password. Not a great one for real world applications, but that will work. All right. So we have logged in. So currently we have nothing like expected. So first thing that we'll do is let's just go ahead and create some customers for us. Let's say Alice, just put a random number at Corda.net and also a random postal code, right? And what we also need is an attachment of some sort of identity proof. This will serve as a Corda attachment. So I'm using a sort of dummy PDF file, and then I can say save. So that will create one customer for me, but this customer is not yet activated. He has to go and basically register himself. This is that step where a customer comes to the bank and a bank official creates an account for them or creates an or registers them onto the banking platform, right? Now say Bob with some number, order.net, postal code, an attachment which will serve as a document that they need to upload, right? So I've got two customers now. So next step is the customer will then go back home and they can register themselves into the application. So over here we have the register menu where you could say Bob, use the same email, .net, give some password that you could remember. Oh, just give me a second. I will need these details. So as I go in here, I need to, this is the customer ID that they need to use to register. So I'll just paste this somewhere. This is for Alice. And then go to Bob. This is Bob's customer ID. All right. Now I should be able to register. So Alice, Corda.net, some password, then the customer ID. And also the same attachment that I used. Correct. That's it. They've been successfully registered. Before I log in, let me just go ahead and register the other user as well, which is Bob. Corda.net, password, the same attachment which we used. And that's it. Now, if I try to log in, there you go. You could see that your account is not yet activated, so you don't have anything that you could do here, right? So you have to first go ahead and activate this account. So once the customer registered, the admin or the bank official, whoever is out there, can then just go ahead and activate these accounts or these customers first of all. All right, so I can go to user management and say guests. So we have two guests. We can make them customers. Alice is a customer now, and Bob is also a customer now. Now they should be able to log in, but before that, we have to create. This is just the customer onboarded. We just have to now go ahead and create accounts for them. So create an account. What kind of account that you want to create? Let's say I want to create a savings account. Say Alice. No current account. Okay. Create a current account first of all, I believe. Okay. So you just have to first create a current account, and then you can put some withdrawal limits. That should create an account for our customer. Let's just go ahead with a current account. You don't need to create savings account, but in order to create a savings account, you first need to create a current account. That's how this application works. So once I have this account, it's in a pending state. So you have to activate this. And the account has been activated, right? So I can go ahead and create an account for Bob now. Put similar kind of some limits. Go to this account, set status as active, and that's it. So these guys are now registered. They have an account created for them. So in order to transact now, first we need to have to deposit some money into this accounts. So let's just go ahead and go to Alice account and say deposit some amount, say some thousands of euros, save it. And so you could see a transaction coming up which says that there has been a deposit into the account of X amount, right? So let's next thing that I want to show is do a transaction. So for that, I have to go to an account, log in to do as a customer. So now I've logged in as a customer. I can go to interbank payments and okay, I'll need the account number first. All right, so if I goes to accounts and I go and see Bob's account, this is the account number. So copy, paste it here. Now Alice can transfer some amount to her, to Bob. Perfect. Go to interbank payments, and this is all selected. You have to select the account number to which you want to transfer and an amount that you want to transfer. Your balance is this much, and so perhaps I can just try and send 5,000. Okay, I have some daily limits which won't allow me to send 5,000. 500. All right, I can send 500. If I look at the transaction, I've sent 500 from my whatever amount that I had. My account currently is debited by 500, and the other account should be credited by 500, which I can verify from here. Go to accounts, I can see the balance of 500 now reflecting in Bob's account. So the bank has the visibility of all what's going on. You can view all the transactions that are happening. You can view all the customers. You can view all the accounts. So that's how your banking application on Corda would really work. We have multiple different other functionalities that you could explore on your own. So if I go to an account here, what I have is multiple different things. Like you could say set overdraft, you could issue loan, and other things as well, which you could always go ahead and sort of explore on your own. So give it some time. And that's it for the demo. Next thing that I'll do is just walk through a little bit of code. It's going to be a bit complex because this is a huge application, and I'll not walk through you to a lot of different things that are there, but I'll just show you how things, some of the important files that we just did right now. So we have an account data. which will basically have all the information, your account IDs, your account info, your customer IDs, and your balance and stuff. Now this is the base account class, and then we have current account and savings account, which will be using that particular account. And then you have different methods which we use, like the deposit, where we have all your uh, all your different logic to add and subtract amounts, add amounts basically. And then you have withdraw method, which will withdraw it and then set status just to change status of your account and all. Right. This is the generate mapped object. This is for the schema. And if there are limits, there are checks which will be taken care of. And these are the things. Similarly, we have the savings bank account, which we didn't really saw, but this would have similar functionalities. Now the savings bank account has different fields. Like we saw, it has less number of fields because we just have a savings bank end date, while your current account has a lot of different features, like your overdraft and your loans and all those things, right? So you could see a lot more fields over here. Like this is your accounts state. And if I look at the contracts, you would see this is the major contract, which will take care of all of your different requirements. So if you go to verify funds deposit, this is the one which will verify, which will run when you do a deposit. Similarly, we would have verify withdraw funds, which will run when you do a withdraw. And there are a lot of different checks that are being done. So just simple checks that we really do in normal circumstances as well. So if your amount is greater than zero, and all these kind of things, and also checking if the 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 account is not being changed. If you look at this particular line, we also check if the account has not changed host. So there are multiple different banks. You don't really change your banks when you do a withdrawal. So these kind of checks which are mandatory that you could put in, right? That's the account. You could just go through some of the other fields here, which would be applicable for other functionalities, right? So there should be one for transfer as well. Um, this is for the create accounts. We don't have anything for create current account. You can put whatever you want, whatever you feel like is important. Similarly for issue loan, all right. So there has to be one for deposit and withdraw funds. So when you pay out, it's basically your deposit and withdraw, which will basically run for you. And then if I look at the flows, so we have our create accounts flow, which will basically create current account flow, and then we have create savings account flow. So we take all the details, and then there is also an abstract flow, which will basically encompass some of the basic functionalities, and then our create current account flow will work on top of that. So it has some of your basic things like create new account transaction. The type of account will depend on what. If it's a current account, the create current account flow will be called, and from within that, it will call these particular methods. I'm not going to the too much details of this. You can read all these code on your own, but I'm just giving you a little bit of a pointer so that you can understand what's going on within this, right? So I guess that's pretty much it for today's webinar. Unless you have any questions, so let's just move on. And these are the resources. I'll just probably even send this in an email after the session. So this is your documentation for your Bank in a Box application. I will just open this. We have a complete documentation page dedicated to this application. So if you really like this application, then you could see what are the different features and what are the different things that you could do with this. And the repo is also open source. So if you want to look at the code, just go ahead and do that. Right. And here's the source code for the Bank in a Box application. So feel free to look at that. All right. So finally, let's take some questions if we have any. We have like 5 to 7 minutes to go. So let's just take some questions.
Ashutosh, is it possible to send these links now in the chat, please?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I'll do that right away. So here is your thank you everyone. So that's the one which will basically give you the docs guide. Here is your guide to deploy your application, and finally your GitHub link for Penguin app. There you go. So these are all the links. We'll also send them out on the email after this, but you can always copy it from the chat as well. All right. So if we not have any more questions, I guess is the time we say goodbye. Well, thanks very much for coming and joining us for this particular webinar. I hope it was fruitful for you guys. And okay, do we have a question?
Oh.
All right. All right. So thanks for joining us, and I hope it was fruitful. I hope you learned something from today. You saw a real world kind of an application, and also you can go ahead and look at all the different features that we have on this application. You could just look at the code, and that should give you a great idea if you're new to Corda, and it would give you a great idea how you should really structure your application, how you should build your applications on Corda, right? So yeah, thanks very much for joining in, and I hope to see you again in the next webinar. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.